All right. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about classification and why we classify living things and how we go about doing that. So finding order and biodiversity is the topic here. So let's first define this word taxonomy. So taxonomy is a system of naming and classifying organisms based on shared characteristics and universal rules. So there's been several people throughout history have tried to classify living things. The first person that really kind of did it was Aristotle. And he had two groups of living things. He had plants, which he classified by their height, as either trees, shrubs, or herbs, or grasses. And then he had animals he classified based on where they live. Did they fly? Did they live on the ground? Did they live in water? And that was kind of the way it was for a long time. And then Carolinus Linnaeus comes along and he develops something called binomial nomenclature and the current taxonomy system we use today. So binomial nomenclature is a system in which each species is given a two-part scientific name, which is made up of their genus and species, the two smallest categories in the classification system. Like I said, it was developed by Carolus Linnaeus, and the advantages are it's the same in all languages. We use Latin, so the words are the same no matter what language that scientist is in. People around the world know what organism you're talking about. There's no confusion that can occur with common names. With common names, you can have, when you talk about a bear or a cat, that may mean something different, or again, obviously with different common names in different languages, that can cause some confusion as well. And the meanings of the words don't change over time because Latin is not a currently used language like English. Those words can change their meaning over time. So here's an example. Here you got two bears, a polar bear and a grizzly bear. But if we talk and use their scientific name, which is again the genus and species name, we know exactly which bear we're talking about if we're somebody who studies that organism. So systematics is the science of naming and grouping organisms. In Linnaeus' system, there are 7 classification levels, and we've added an 8th one recently. We'll talk about that in a minute. Those classification levels or groups are called taxa, or a single one is a taxon. So going from the smallest, least inclusive group with the most shared characteristics, we have species. They can interbreed, they can produce fertile offspring. A genus is a group of similar species. A family is a group of similar genera. An order, closely related families. Class, similar orders. Phyla, similar classes, and so on. So as you go from species on up, there's fewer and fewer traits in common until you get to the kingdom, which is the most inclusive group of traditional taxonomy. It's also the one that has the fewest common characteristics amongst all the members of the kingdom. So here you can see an example with camels and their relatives here. You can see the different classifications of this particular camel here from its genus all the way up to its kingdom. So as we've made new discoveries, we've had to make changes to our classification system. So Linnaeus, back in the 1700s, he had 2 kingdoms, Plantae and Animalia, plants and animals. And then in the 1800s, we added the Protist kingdom, which were things that didn't really fit in plants. They didn't really fit in animals. A lot of them were unicellular. Small things like amoebas and things like that. And then in the 1950s, we added the bacteria kingdom, which was called Monera at the time. So we had, again, a 5-kingdom system. Today we have a 6-kingdom system. We split the bacteria, the Monera kingdom, into the Eubacteria and the Archaeobacteria, because the Archaeobacteria have a lot of unique differences that make them different from all the other eukaryotes as well as from the other bacteria. And there's talk about adding a 7th kingdom, the amoebas, separate them out of the Protist kingdom because they have a unique genetic code. So relatively recently, we've added another level on top of the kingdom level called a domain. It's a new taxonomic category developed due to the discovery of that prokaryotic groups are more different from each other and from eukaryotes than others than we had previously thought. So a good way to remember the levels of classification from domain down to species is Dear King Philip came over for good spaghetti. So the letter of each word is the first letter in each of those different classifications from domain down to species. Again, Dear King Philip came over for good spaghetti. So a domain is larger than a kingdom. There's only 3 of them. 2 of the domains are prokaryotes. The eubacteria are in the bacteria domain, and the archaeobacteria are in the archaea domain. And then all the eukaryotes, the protists, fungi, plants, and animals, are in the eukarya domain. Here we can see some of the classifications. Again, from the domain and the kingdom. And again, bacteria and archaea are prokaryotes. Everything else is a eukaryote. With cell structure, bacteria and archaea have cell walls, but they're made up of different substances. Protists, some have cell walls, some don't. Some have chloroplasts, some don't. With fungi, they have cell walls. They're made of chitin. Plants have cell walls made of cellulose, and they also have chloroplasts. Animals don't have cell walls. They don't have chloroplasts. As far as the number of cells, the bacteria and archaea are all unicellular. The protists, most of them are unicellular, but there are some colonial protists and some that are multicellular, like slime molds and giant kelp. With fungi, most of them are multicellular, with a few unicellular ones like yeast. Algae can sometimes be in the plant kingdom, sometimes it's put in the protist kingdom. If algae are included in the plant kingdom, those would be unicellular for the most part, but all the other plants are multicellular. And then all animals are multicellular. How they get their food, bacteria, some are autotrophs, some are heterotrophs. They could be chemosynthetic or photosynthetic, same with the archaea. With protists, you have some photosynthetic autotrophs and some heterotrophs. Fungi and animals are all heterotrophs. Plants are all autotrophs. As far as examples, you can see those here.